And then once we're done, once she's done, then you can unmute yourself and ask your questions as well. So just please be mindful of that. Feel free to write questions and ask her. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Garima Raheja. She's our speaker today. Garima is a PhD candidate at Columbia University in New York. She grew up in New Delhi and moved to California when she was 10 years old. And she did her Bachelor of Arts in Data Science from the University of California, Berkeley. Garima, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you. And you have a very interesting story of being born in India and have spent your initial years in India and then most of your life until now in the US. And as you have a background in STEM, we're interested in your thoughts and your journey of navigating cross-cultural issues and exploring a male-dominant professional field. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Divya. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to meet all of you. I have a presentation prepared today, but it's pretty informal. Most of my slides are just photos that I thought I would share. And I would love for this to be interactive. So you're welcome to ask me questions about anything that I talk about, anything that I don't talk about that you want to hear more about. And so I'll screen share right now and hit play. Oh, sorry. Okay, so my name is Garima Raheja. As Divya said, I'm a PhD candidate at Columbia University. So I grew up in New Delhi and then I moved to the United States when I was 10 years old. I'm going to be spending the next half an hour talking about me. So before I start, I would actually love to hear a little bit about you. So if anybody wants to unmute or even type in the chat, just tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you are, what you're interested in. I would actually, I would really love to learn more about you. Would anybody like to go first?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ma'am. Yeah, my name is Mary. Yeah, hello. My name is Mary Kashyap. Currently, I'm in Bangalore. I am in my MSc first year. I am a biotech student. I'm very interested in the research field. Actually, I want to do research. After my MSc, not exactly after my MSc, but in future also, I am very interested for my doing some research, like to find something, like to have something of my own, like that kind of thing. And I'm really inspired by this all the STEM people, mainly the women, like how they have evolved, like how they have adapted to the stereotypes of society and everything, and how they have proved themselves to be the best, that we also can do everything what man can do and all those things. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to meet you, and I'm excited to hear that you're interested in research. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Can we have one more person tell me a little bit about yourself? It doesn't have to be very long. You can tell me just a few lines.
Go ahead, don't be shy. This is informal, so go ahead, someone.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Hi. My name is Jibika Roy.
Hi, good
And
evening.
hi, ma'am. My name is Jibika Roy, and I'm currently pursuing BTech in Bioengineering and Technology. My also aim is to go for research, but the tracks are a little bit difficult in India. The scope of bioengineering is a little bit less compared to other abroad countries. So if you could, give us a little bit of prior knowledge, so how we can pursue the further research fields in bioengineering and technology in the abroad countries. So I will be thankful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for telling me about what you're interested in. And biotech is so exciting. So I'm really excited to hear that you are interested in it. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Ma'am, I would like to speak.
Sure, go ahead.
Hello, ma'am. Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Myself, Joita Roy. I am currently pursuing masters in botany. I'm from Guwahati University, and I really want to go for PhD or in the line of professor. I really want to be a professor, but I want to do my PhD in abroad as well. But I have no ideas how to approach for that. So I would really would be grateful to you if you help me or give some advice for studies in abroad. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited to hear that you're excited to go abroad.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else? Also मुझे हिंदी आती है, तो अगर आपको हिंदी में बात करना है या कुछ सवाल पूछना है तो आप वो भी कर सकते हैं. Yeah. Anybody else? No problem. I can get started with my presentation, but I will be looking at the chat the whole time. So you are welcome to ask me questions in the chat, or if you want to speak, just let me know, and we can make this interactive. This presentation is really for you, and I want to talk about what you want to hear about. So if you have any questions, please feel free to make this a time that's useful for you. Okay, so I can start a little bit about I grew up in New Delhi. I went to school in New Delhi. I went to the Mothers International School. All my family is from New Delhi, so I lived here and I really enjoyed spending time with my family. I really enjoyed like the big crowds in the metro station, taking the metro everywhere, seeing the metro come to life as I was living there, spending time with my Nanaji and Naniji, my grandparents, and traveling around India and meeting other people there. A lot of my friends were from different parts of India because New Delhi really has people from all over India, which was very exciting. And it's a place I really love and a place I care a lot about. So when I was 10 years old, my father got a job in the US and we thought it was going to be just for 1 year. So we moved from India to the US thinking it was just for 1 year. We didn't take too many things with us. And I wasn't too worried about settling in because I thought, oh, it's just 1 year. Even if it doesn't go well, I will come home in 1 year. It'll be fine. I'll just treat it like a long vacation. So that's how I approached it. So when I came to school in the US, I really struggled right away. It's actually interesting. I feel like my science education in India often was more advanced than what I was learning in the US. And I spoke English pretty well because I went to an international school. But the English that we spoke in the US was so different in such strange ways that it took me a long time to figure out how to translate my thoughts into the English that people were speaking here. For example, I went to elementary school, which is the word for school from first grade to sixth grade, and then we go to a different school from seventh grade to eighth grade, and then we go to a whole different school from ninth grade to 12th grade. Um, I had no idea how to navigate that. In India, the school I went to had kindergarten through 12th grade all in one building. You would see the same people at school every day, but in elementary school in the US, you are in classes with different people every hour of the day. And so it was really hard to make friends. Um, in fact, I remember on my second day of school, I asked them for the timetable because in my world, the timetable meant the schedule of when I get to go home, when I have to be at school, because every single day, the time I had to be at school and the time I had to go home from school was completely different. But in the US, like timetable doesn't mean time of schooling. Timetable means multiplication tables. And so my teacher thought I didn't know how to do multiplication in class 4, and then put me in first class math. And so for a few years, I was learning math. I was way below what I was learning in India, mostly because I wasn't able to communicate what I wanted in the English that they spoke here. That was a big challenge for me, and I think that has been the hardest thing to overcome is being able to communicate with people in a completely different country. You can speak the same language, you can know more than they know sometimes, but being able to talk to them in the same language is really difficult. Also, when I moved here in class 4, the history books talked a lot about the Indians, and the top right picture is the picture they would show whenever they talked about Indians. And I don't know, does it look like any kind of Indian person to you, or does it look like anything we do in India? Any thoughts? Okay, well, it didn't look like. Oh, go ahead. Someone unmuted. Go ahead. Okay, no problem. It didn't look like any kind of Indian person to me. It took me a long time to learn that the people who lived in the United States for a long time were called Native Americans. Um, and they were also referred to as American Indians. So that was really confusing to me, trying to make sense of my culture, which was India Indian, and Native American, which was American Indian. And I was being labeled as Indian American. So that's something I'm still trying to learn about. Again, speaking English, but speaking a different kind of English was really challenging. I was very lucky that the place I moved to was California, where there's a pretty big population of Indian immigrants. So at school, we would have UN Day or Culture Day, and I would see other people wearing saris or suits or langas. So that was really nice to have a community of other Indian people who understood, what I was going through and how big of a change it was. Oh, I see Anisha dropped her bio in the chat. Thank you, Anisha. It's nice to hear that you're interested in zoology. That's a very exciting field. Yeah, feel free to drop more things in the chat as well. Anyways, elementary school in the US was a huge struggle, but luckily there were other people who looked like me, who spoke Hindi sometimes, who were able to help me translate sometimes and explain to my teacher what I wanted. And over the years, I had to do a lot of listening, and I figured out how to advocate for myself a lot better. One really interesting thing has been, when you go abroad, you still want to celebrate the holidays and the festivals that you did when you were in India because they're such a big part of your culture. But everybody celebrates them differently here. And oftentimes, there are no big parties to celebrate this. You don't have your entire family, you just have your little group of people that you know. For my case, it was my brother and my parents. And so you end up celebrating much smaller and at home. And there wasn't any place to get mithai, so we'd have to make mithai at home, and that was a real struggle in India. I feel like I've never thought about making kalakand or gulab jamuns at home. I just go buy them from the nearest place, and they're much better. So that was a huge challenge. And anything you want to do, anything you want to celebrate, you have to do it on your own. There's nobody else celebrating around you. And so a lot of times, we have to go buy sparklers, figure out where they're even purchased, because nobody else is doing sparklers in the middle of November to celebrate Diwali. And for a lot of occasions, it's very expensive to travel back to India. And so you end up doing a lot of birthdays, just over WhatsApp phone call. And so it's definitely challenging to be away from your family, but it's not impossible. And there are so many technology tools now that make it so much easier to stay in touch with people, even when you're far away from them. So that has been really valuable to me and to my family. It's also interesting, there are some Indian festivals that look really fun, and there are people who want to celebrate them with you, even though they don't understand what it's about. For example, Holi is really big in the United States, and every year around Holi, the local temples will, celebrate Holi, and then people from all backgrounds, all countries will want to join, and they just want to come and have fun with the colors. But you have a cultural connection with it, so bridging that gap is often a challenge too, and wanting to invite them to your celebration, but also maintaining some kind of cultural and religious significance to the festivals that are so important to you. One of the most exciting parts about living in the US has always been the access to nature, and to go trekking is so easy. This was not something I did very much in India that I knew how to do or I knew where to do it. And it was something that really inspired me when I moved to the United States. Like, big areas of the country are preserved, They're national parks and they're reserved just for trekking or for hiking. There's no development, no oil refineries there, no cities, very few people. Um, and this was something that was really inspiring to me, something very different from the life I'd lived in India, and something that gave me a lot of new things to try. So the picture on the left is me trekking under a cave. The middle picture is climbing a mountain named Half Dome, and then sitting on a cliff that's so far above anything else in the valley. The top right is a picture of a state called Utah, where all the rocks are very red, um, which is really strange for me to see like rock formations that are arches. And then the picture at the bottom right is using some cables to climb up a big rock in Yosemite in California. So this was something that I started really enjoying. And as my father's post got extended, we ended up staying in the US for a few more years. And this is what I was really excited to explore and pursue. And the place I was living in California is very close to a lot of different nature formations. So I was really excited about that. And I really, really started to find joy in going outdoors and exploring nature. Um, so as we ended up staying in the US for many more years, I realized that my life here was becoming a little bit more permanent. And I had the choice to try to go back to India for college or stay in the US. So I opted to stay in the US for college because I was admitted to the University of California, Berkeley. Um, have any of you heard about this school? Or what are the
You
schools in
guys
the
can
US
write in
that
the
you've heard
chat
about?
box if anyone feels shy. Feel free to write in the chat box. And you can be interactive. This is informal.
Yes, ma'am, I have heard about it.
Yes, ma'am, I have heard about it.
Okay. What have you heard about this school?
Ma'am, I just heard the name. There's nothing more I know about it. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay.
One of my uncles has passed out from there.
Oh wow, okay. That's awesome. You can unmute or you can drop in the chat. I'm curious to hear if you girls have already thought about which school in the US you are interested in going to or which university you want to go to, or have heard about. So maybe, yeah, maybe drop that in the chat or tell me a little bit. Okay, no problem. I will proceed with talking, but you're definitely welcome to add names of schools you're interested in the chat box. And if I know anything about them, I'll be happy to talk more about the schools that you are interested in as well. Um, so the University of California, Berkeley, which is often referred to just as UC Berkeley, or sometimes even just as Cal for the word California in it, um, was a really exciting place. It was really scary at first because it's a huge campus um, with over 30,000 students on the campus, studying everything from English to science to dance, all on one campus. So the people I was meeting were all very different from me. And I really had to struggle to find people who were like me, who I could, study with all the time. Okay, I see one person is interested in Penn State. Awesome. Awesome. That's on the East Coast. So I know some people who've gone to that school and really enjoy going there. Um, Actually, Penn State and UC Berkeley are both public schools, which is a really interesting dynamic. So in the US, many universities are public universities and some of them are private universities. Some of them function the same way, essentially. And UC Berkeley often, is considered to be close to a private university in some of the ways it's run. And a lot of times, I think public universities have a lot more scholarships than private universities do. So that's really exciting. And Penn State is a great school. Um, One of the scariest parts about going to school at UC Berkeley was learning in these giant lecture halls where you take a seat next to almost 1,000 other students, and one professor stands at the front of the room and lectures. And you can imagine if you have a question and there's 1,000 other people in the lecture hall, it's so scary to raise your hand and ask a question in front of 1,000 other people. So that was very scary for me, and I often struggled to learn things because the professor would give a lecture, I would not know one part of it. I would get lost, but I wouldn't raise my hand to ask because there were so many other people listening. Um, so I had to really go seek out a learning environment where it was a little bit smaller and I could actually talk to people one on one to get answers from them. And I learned that American universities have something called office hours, where the professor or their teaching assistant will sit in a small room, like the bottom left picture I'm showing, around a table. Students will come and work on their homework problems together, which is totally allowed and in fact encouraged because some of these homework problems are very difficult. Um, we don't, we're not expected to do homework alone pretty much at any time. Everything is done with a group of people. Um, and in these office hours, it'll only be 10 or 15 people at a time allowed into the room. And you work with each other and you work with the professors directly to get one on one help, which is a lot easier than asking questions in a lecture hall full of 1,000 people. Um, so that was a really big part of my life, is going to office hours and asking questions. And in a lecture hall, you can ask the smartest question and it can feel kind of stupid because somebody in the room will know more than you. But in office hours, it's such a comfortable space that you can even ask stupid questions and very basic questions, and nobody will judge you because it's just a small group of people. Everybody's learning together. And since you're all working on the homework problems together, everybody really wants to support each other and make sure you don't just get the right answer, but you get the right ideas and the right process for doing your homework. I was not very used to this. In India, we didn't have anything like this at my school. We definitely didn't have this in the other schools I went to the United States to. It's just a college thing. But it was a very useful tool, and I had to ask around a lot to figure out what kind of other tools existed for me to be able to learn on a more one-on-one level with my teachers. Another big part of college is um, you have to figure out your own time. Like there's no scheduled time for you to do your homework. Classes happen in the mornings, but you can also just not go to your classes if you don't want to. Nobody takes attendance. Um, Oftentimes, like homework problems are due, but they're not graded. So you can even not do your homework and really, go the whole semester. The only thing that's required is the final exam. Um, and it was definitely a challenge, like learning how to budget my time and knowing which classes to go to, which attendance to make sure I was attending, which homework problems to do, which ones to skip, um, because there's so much happening and not enough time to do everything, and you have to decide where you're going to spend your time to make sure that when the final exam happens at the end, you are prepared for it. um, oh, someone unmuted. Is there a question? Okay, no problem. um, Definitely feel free to ask any questions. Um, but yes, definitely when you consider going to school in the US, wherever you're considering doing that, ask about office hours and ask about the student to faculty ratio, um, and how you can go to a school with a smaller student to faculty ratio so you can have more close interactions with the teachers and the professors and the teaching assistants. Because learning in a lecture hall full of 1,000 people is very, very difficult, especially when the material is going over your head and you need to ask a lot of questions. And definitely make sure that you know other resources that are being offered and make sure you're using all of them. And use as much of them as possible. Like these schools exist to help you learn, and you should not feel any shame in asking questions or requesting a professor's time and saying, I want to meet with you one-on-one so you can explain something to me. That's their job. I was always really scared of asking for someone's time and their help. But a big part of college was realizing that I need to ask for more help and work with other people instead of trying to do everything just by myself. Um, the one thing that I started to learn about at UC Berkeley was what science as a career really means. In my head, it was pretty limited when I went. I'd grown up hearing about was that most scientists did lab research, and most scientists just talk to each other, didn't really like do much outside of their labs. I didn't think it was very exciting to be a scientist. And I thought it was kind of, boring, honestly. And when I went to Berkeley, I met scientists of all different kinds. The top left picture is a team of scientists who study concrete, and they make different types of concrete and figure out which one is stronger. And then the research they do about concrete is used all over the world in making our buildings. And I was like, I didn't even realize that's a field of research. I thought that was just something, people just use concrete. They don't think about it. Growing up, I had seen lots of construction happening. I just hadn't thought about how research could help make that construction better. Um, I also met a lot of people who did research about soil underground, like what kind of soil do plants need to grow better? What kind of nutrients should be in it? How do we figure out what nutrients are in the soil? And I took a class about soil and plants, and I just was spending so much time in the field. It was so exciting, and I was working really closely with other people to do all these experiments, but they were not in a lab, they were in a field. And it would be like almost a party of everyone going together, doing a lot of science together, spending like a full day just collecting samples. And after spending that much time with my cohort of classmates who were also doing this class, I became really close with them, and I was like, wow, science is something where you can meet people and make friends. It's not just something you do alone. And a huge part of science, especially in the US, is conferences. So a conference is once a year, a group of scientists will get together and make a poster. So on the bottom right, you can see my friend Amy. She made a poster about her research project, and she put it up on a board. She got assigned a little board. And then other people who are interested in that field can search for different types of posters. And they come visit your poster and ask you questions about it. And sometimes you get ideas for science you can do, or sometimes if you are looking for opportunities, when somebody comes to ask you about your poster, you can say, oh, I'm looking for postdoc opportunities or I'm PhD opportunities. And it's a huge networking thing. So I would definitely recommend, if you can present any work you're doing right now at a research conference, it's a great way to network and to meet people. And to ask for opportunities like PhDs or smaller research positions. Definitely try to present at a conference. You don't have to have a whole lot of research done. It can be a small project. If you want to do a poster, you can put it on a poster. If you want to do an oral presentation and talk for 10 minutes, you can present your research that way. If you want to put on a panel discussion, this is a great place to do it. So depending on your field, there are different conferences that happen. And there's so much networking that happens at these conferences, and so many jobs and program applications. Like you technically apply to them on paper, but the best applicants are the ones who have already talked to the job application people before and networked with them and interviewed informally with them. And the best connections and the best jobs come from before the application, doing that networking. So if you have any questions about going to science conferences, presenting at them, like how to network at these conferences, so you can get the jobs or the research positions that you want, definitely let me know. It took me a long time to learn how to use these conferences for their full benefit, instead of just going and taking notes and learning about science. Actually using them for networking and making the best of them. And actually the way I got into graduate school was I presented my research at one of these conferences. It was a very small research project. I'd only worked on it for a couple months. And one of the professors who walked past actually was like, oh, this is very interesting. I have a research position open as a PhD student. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I didn't even see it advertised on the internet. And she was like, I'm not advertising it. I am going around this conference looking for people who would be a good fit. This is not a position open to the public. I'm selecting people for it right now. So if I had not been at the conference, I would never have been selected for it because I wouldn't even have seen that position. I didn't even know it was open. So yeah, definitely let me know if you today or even future. I will drop my email, and if you're interested in learning how to network in a science career, that's such a big part of doing science in the US. One of the most interesting experiences I had as a scientist. I became really interested because I was doing a lot of nature trekking about environmental science and understanding, what is actually happening in nature and what are the processes that govern it, and then how does it affect people. It was kind of what I was asking a lot about. So I got to live on this ship and sample different parts of the ocean around California. So we would measure the qualities of the water in different parts of the ocean. We would take out some of the fish in different parts of the ocean and sample them and figure out, what kind of health problems the fish were having and how climate change was really impacting the health of the ocean and all the animals in it. This was completely different from any research I'd done before because all the other research projects I'd done involved, labs at a university or, not living on a ship, definitely not like traveling around the ocean collecting samples. Definitely not dealing with fish of any kind. I haven't touched fish in my whole life. I'm vegetarian. I was very confused about what was going on. And just spending like so much time because you're trapped on this ship with your scientist people for the 2 weeks that you're outside on the ocean. You really get to know them very well because you spend like every single day of like every single minute of your life on the ship with the same 10 other people. So that was really exciting, and I got to spend 10 days talking to people who do science as a career, and I learned a lot about it, and it was just so exciting. That science as a career could mean like living on a ship and traveling around the world, and getting paid to do that work. So that was a huge inspiration. And these are some of the pictures of me living on the ship. It was really beautiful to see the night sky over the ocean where there's no light pollution and just see all the stars in the Milky Way. It was really exciting to see like different sea animals, like whales or dolphins would come near us all the time. It was just like a life-changing experience. I was really unsure about it before I went on the ship. I was like, I don't know if I can handle living on this ship, and it moves around a lot, so you get ocean sickness a lot. And that still happened, and it was still tough to like be away from everything I knew before, but spending that time there really changed the way I viewed science and made it so much more exciting to me than just sitting in a lab and like doing test tube science. So after I left on the ship, the ship was a summer internship I did while I was at UC Berkeley. I came back and life went back to, studying very hard. And especially in the final 2 years of university, it was a lot of, booking a library room with some of my project members or friends, and just, studying very, very late into the night, watching lecture recordings, once, then 2 times, and 3 times, and 4 times. Like some of these lectures were so complicated, I would have to listen to them 4 times to even understand what they were saying. And so, add that to 4 classes a week, which each have 3 lectures a week. That's like 12 lectures to watch 4 times over. That's like 48 hours of just lecture videos to watch to try to understand what was happening. So I was really lucky that I had a good group of friends who were doing this with me, and we would just spend so much time in the library. Sometimes the libraries were so crowded we didn't even get a chair to sit in. We would have to sit on the floor and just study. And the picture on the left side is one time I stayed up so late studying that the next day when I was trying to study, I couldn't even handle it. And I just like went to sleep on the table at a random cafe. And I was scared that my laptop would have gotten stolen because I was so tired I wouldn't even have noticed. But that's kind of when I was learning that I was, maybe working a little bit too hard and not taking care of my health as much. I see a question in the chat that says, ma'am, it would be really helpful if you could suggest any fellowships or how to approach for internships in the universities of USA in the fields of STEM. That's a great question. Definitely, I can talk a little bit about it right now. But if you want to send me an email, I would be able to help you find a fellowship that's more relevant to your field, and to your specific interests. So I will drop my email in the chat, and I'm definitely happy to help you one-on-one find a fellowship that's relevant to your field. In general, for finding fellowships or internships, a big way to do it is to find a professor or a graduate student and their homepage on the university website. So you can do that by Googling like Penn State zoology professor, right? Like just Googling the university you want to work at, the field of science, and then putting in professor at the end. And many professors and researchers have a website, and they put their email on the website, and they put a list of their current projects. So you need to read the current projects that they have. Maybe they even have a page about future projects, and figure out which of those projects you would be good for. And then you need to email them with your CV or your resume and express your interest. That's like most of the ways that fellowships are given out. Applying for fellowships is a great way to, hear about them. But the real way to get all the fellowships is to email professors one-on-one to advertise your interest and your expertise, and then ask them for a research position. In terms of applying for different fellowships, there is the National Science Foundation's research program. It is called I'm typing it into the chat. This is a big program that has a lot of different research opportunities that you can look into as well for finding opportunities at different universities. But yes, definitely, I'll drop my email in the chat and I can send it to you again. If you're interested in finding fellowships or research opportunities, you can email me and I will help you one-on-one find these opportunities. Great, any other questions? Great, okay, I'll move on, but feel free to ask more questions. A really big part of going to UC Berkeley was finding a community. And I know people say this word a lot, but a community is really like a small group of friends that you're very close with. So you'll see that in some of these pictures, like many of the faces are repeated. And you'll also see that not all my friends were Indian. And that was a huge challenge too, was, learning how to make friends with people from different cultures, a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Cambodian people, people who are from Korea were a big part of my community, some people who are Jewish, my Black friends, my white friends, and really, bridging those cultural gaps and finding what you have in common, and really getting to know your friends and relying on them as a support structure. Because when you're in college, you're often not living with your family, you're living in an apartment by yourself. So you really have to, trust your friends and rely on them for anything and everything that you want. So you'll see that in these pictures, a lot of my friends groups were very diverse. And after a few years of going through very difficult college together, we became really close. And instead of just studying all the time, started having more time spent together just to know each other. So the top is a picture of my birthday when my friend surprised me with cake and flowers. The bottom right is a whole group of us going to Indian food together. So not everybody in the group is Indian, but everybody loved Indian food a lot. And then the right side image, bottom right, is me and a group of friends were pretty much every Friday night in the semester would go to the same ice cream shop, order the same ice cream and the same fries, and just sit together and like complain about our whole weeks together. And it was time I wasn't studying, but it was so much more important to be able to talk to my friends and like have a group of people to to really talk about what we were going through and how difficult the school system really was. And I think what really got me through university and how tough it was my group of friends and having a really close knit group of people who I could rely on. So as you move into, going to university, doing a research career, definitely focus on building that community. And it's very easy to just focus all your time on your job or your research, but it's equally important to focus your time on your friends and the people that you trust, and spending quality time with them, having fun as well, which is very important. One interesting thing that's always, on my mind is the idea of going home. So when I'm living in university, basically I have like everything I could fit into one car, and that's all the things I brought with me. So I have to really make a home for myself in my college apartment. And going home often means, packing up all that stuff in one car. Again, nothing more than that can fit, and everything else has to be thrown away. And going home, my family lived about an hour of a drive away from the university campus I went to, which was really nice because at least I could come home to my parents when I really needed to, to spend some time with them. But the rest of my family was all in India, very far away, and I would get to visit them once every 2 years. So the middle picture is we were visiting India, we were coming back home, and we went Rocky shopping together. The top right is coming back and seeing some of my Bua's family, eating parathas together from this like random dukan in the middle of Delhi that was really famous for some reason. I really miss Desi McDonald's, and like the taste of food, even if it's fast food in India, is so different from the taste of food in the US. A lot of American food is like much more bland. So I just really craved like Indian food all the time. And also just craved, being able to spend time with my family. So one of the challenges is, how expensive it is to go back home sometimes. And how you can't take a lot of items with you. You have to fit everything into a small bag. So it's definitely something I'm still learning to deal with and to kind of bridge that gap if I can't travel, especially during COVID, right? To bridge that gap by just seeing my family virtually. One of the huge things that's impacted my life, especially in California. So California is a really, really dry state. It doesn't rain a lot here. We've been in a drought for many, many years, and it's gotten dry to the point where now if a small fire starts in the forest, the entire forest catches on fire. So maybe you folks have even seen the news about the wildfires in California, or seen pictures of it. But there are days in our lives here where the entire sky is orange. So the top right is a picture of a bridge near my house, and behind it, every little drop of orange is a fire happening, and the entire sky is orange. The bottom left side is the backyard park near my home, completely orange. And it reminds me a lot of air pollution in Delhi sometimes, maybe not the orangeness of it, but you can breathe it and you can sense how polluted the air is, especially when the fires are happening. So I went to the University of California, Berkeley, but my friends who were from China often felt the same way too. Beijing is also a really polluted city, and they would call it the University of California Beijing as a joke because of how polluted California was becoming. On the right side, you can see a screenshot of all the fires that were happening placed on a map in California. So just like we check the weather every day before we leave to figure out, what clothes to wear, we would have to check the fire map every day to figure out how bad the fires were, what parts of the state were just like you couldn't even drive there because they were, aflame. And it really impacted me, and I realized, because of all the fires happening in California, how closely it reminded me of air pollution in Delhi, that environmental science is a problem that we face across the world. It's not just for one area, it's not just for one type of people. The issues of the climate are really impacting the entire planet, and nobody can escape from these problems. So when I was thinking about, what I wanted to spend my career doing, I was really enjoying the research opportunities I was getting at UC Berkeley, in a lab. Um, and the lab was studying air pollution and also used a lot of data science, which is what was my field of study. And I have decided that, this was the area that I was most interested in. So when I was applying to PhD programs, I was really looking for groups that were doing research about air quality and fire and its public health impacts on people. And that was, completely driven by my personal interests, and what I was really, really passionate about. And research is a very difficult field. Often, results take a long time. So you want to make sure that you're doing research in a field that is exciting to you, that you're really passionate about it, because you're going to be spending a lot of time doing research. And if it's not something you're interested in, it's going to be really easy to just not care about it, or to give up on it. So definitely, when you're applying for programs, like think about what drives you to be in that program, and if you're going to be able to sustain being there long term. I see a question in the chat. This is a great question. How did you communicate with international students and build your community? Being away from home and having a wonderful support group as friends is really necessary. This is a great question. With international students and trying to build friendships with them, everybody's coming from a very different place, very different morals, very different worldviews. And I think that was the biggest thing, was in looking for friends, not just looking for who was the most exciting person, or like who was the most interesting person, or who was the most talented person. That's not gonna, make a big difference when you need them to help you when you are feeling sick and you need them to bring you medicine. In finding friends, I didn't really care as much about where you came from or who you were. To me with respect, and having the same morals and values as I did. So a big part of making friends was, asking people about how they spent their time, or like what they thought was important, what they thought was not important, like how much they wanted to party or how much they wanted to study. A huge part of it was, really figuring out people's morals and, aligning myself closely with the people who had really good morals, who supported each other. I had to support them when they were in times of need, when somebody else was feeling down, I have to be there to support them, cook them dinner and, support them and bring them up. And I wanted people who did the same for me. Which is not to say that you shouldn't, be friends with people who are different from you. It's good to have those friends as well, but you want to make sure you have a core group of people who you can rely on for anything. And finding that is a huge part of college, is finding who those people are going to be and who your friendships are going to be even after you graduate from college. I think research in the US moves you around. There's always opportunities at different parts of the country, and you're really encouraged to move around a lot to make the most of your career, which can be really alienating and lonely unless you have a close group of friends who you keep in touch with. So definitely, think about the friends you have right now, and even if you're far away from them, like put in the energy to keep in touch with them, because it'll be really, really important later on down the road. Okay, so when I got to the end of my college career, I was getting ready to graduate. I took a lot of graduation photos with the friends who had really, supported me all throughout. So on the bottom left, you can see a picture of a club I was in, which started off as like a professional group I joined to learn a little bit more about consulting projects, but then really became my closest group of friends. A lot of them were Indian, which is, really helpful for me, but a lot of them were not Indian too. And because I was spending so much time with these people, like, and really working with them on issues I cared about, I became really, really close with all of them. And this is the group that has, been my support system even through the coronavirus pandemic. We have all, because we're so closely connected, have been able to stay in touch ever since then too. So when I graduated, I had a lot of different thoughts in my head. I was like, being in school, doing research was very exciting, but also exhausting. It was also very tiring. And so when I was applying to graduate programs, I was very excited about the idea of doing more research. And I actually, so from the science conference I went to, one of the professors asked me if I wanted to join their PhD program at Columbia University, which is in New York, which is actually on the other side of the US from where I live right now, and where I went to Berkeley as well. So I did accept the offer to go to school there. But I had a lot of doubts and I had a lot of questions about, can I do this? Will I be good at it? And also, will I just be able to, make it? And so I ended up committing to Columbia University, but I was so burnt out from studying all the time that I asked to defer my admission for a year. And I spent 1 year in Hawaii, which is a beautiful island, just doing like manual labor gardening jobs. Very different from a PhD, very different from research, not prestigious at all. Just spending time like gardening, taking care of birds, picking up like rotten fruit that was falling on the ground, fixing like machines, picking flowers. And that was really important for me. And it was a big part of resetting to make sure that I, was away from school for a little bit, took a little bit of a break. And then when I came back, I felt a lot better about spending time in school. So definitely, start recognizing the signs of burning out and figuring out if you are getting tired of just doing school all the time, and make sure you take those breaks or spend that time, doing things that are outside of academia. What I've learned, is school is not going to be there when I'm at my lowest point. What's going to be there are my hobbies and my friends. So over the past few years, I've worked really hard to spend time on my hobbies. Sometimes it feels a little pointless to be like, this is not going to help me with my career. Why am I learning how to bake a cake? Why am I learning how to dance? What's the point of going for a long bike ride? Why should I try all these different foods, like when I can just try the food I always have liked? But I've tried to really make a use of all the different hobbies that I have access to in the US. And even now online, there's so much access to dance classes, to baking classes, to other people. And it really gave me something to look forward to that wasn't research. And it helped me, it actually helped me do better in my research career, having other hobbies outside of going to school. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing a PhD at Columbia University. I research atmospheric chemistry, so I take a lot of measurements of air pollutants and study how they're changing. At the same time, being a graduate student actually involves a lot of teaching. So I do a lot of teaching to other graduate students, to school students that are like 10 or 12 years old. And I also work really closely with different nonprofits across the country who are working on air pollution, and help them do their research better too. So the bottom is actually a Zoom call I was on with a number of nonprofits who are trying to do air pollution research in their own small communities. And I, as a university scientist, get to help them a lot too. So research and a PhD is not just about the research that you do, but it's also a lot about helping other people and like serving different advisory boards as well, which I didn't know about before, but I'm learning a lot about now and having to spend time on it now. So that's a little bit about me. Please feel free to ask questions. I know I talked really fast about a lot of different things. So yeah, I can stop screen sharing and I can be here for half an hour, 45 minutes, even more if you want, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Ma'am?
Yes, go ahead.
I forgot. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. To you,
Yeah,
too,
Happy
ma'am.
New Year to you too.
Thank you, ma'am. I wanted to ask about getting into any university. Actually, when compared to India, in US or abroad, a lot of attention is also given to the extracurricular activities. While in India, a major part of our life is uh, focused in academics. So, is it a bump in the road if we want to get into any university abroad?
Yeah, your extracurriculars are going to matter a lot when you apply, and it can be challenging to balance them on top of your academics. And so my advice on that would be learning how to budget your time very well and making sure you're spending time on those academics and doing really well in those exams, but also seeking out those opportunities outside. So extracurriculars could be anything from volunteering somewhere and, at a local school or, giving your time to talking to students. It can be very small. It can be, extracurriculars could even include like things that are related to research. Like maybe you help a local nonprofit in some way, or you present your research at a small science conference, or if the science conference doesn't exist, you put together a conference where other students and you can put your research out there. Um, Extracurriculars can even be things you do for fun as a hobby, like jogging can be an extracurricular. When schools in the US look for students, they're not just looking for academically strong students, they're looking for students who will bring something to their community and make the university a more lively place, right? Um, that's what they want you to do. And so you have to make sure that when you apply to the school, you are able to advertise yourself as someone who has something to contribute outside of just academics. It doesn't have to be a lot of extracurriculars, just one or two are fine. Um, so just pick something that you are interested in and find a way to do it. It doesn't have to be a lot of time spent on the extracurriculars. They just want to know that you're like a well-rounded person. And also those extracurriculars, you don't have to just do them for your application. They're often things that you are passionate about. Like if you like to do embroidery, or if you like to take care of animals in your free time, like that can be an extracurricular too. So think about the things that you're doing already in your life, which of them you want to spend more time on. And then just, like it doesn't have to be a program, it doesn't have to be like many hours a week. It can just be a few hours of the week that you're doing something that's outside of your academics. For me, that's nature trekking and that's teaching school students. Those are my two extracurriculars, and that's perfectly fine. You don't need more than that. Does that answer the question that you had?
Yes, ma'am, that was helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Hello, ma'am. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, as we know, as we Indians, we are not really punctual. We have really time management issues. So, how to manage our time while studying in the US if we plan to study abroad? Because I know, as far as I know, time is really maintained there in the universities. So, how can we manage the time? We can learn to manage time from here as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as Indian people, we're used to being late to everything, like Indian Standard Time, and that doesn't really work in the US. In fact, in order to be considered like on time to something, you actually have to be 5 minutes early. So that's still something I struggle with. I'm still used to being late to things, and if someone says 8 p.m., I don't expect the party to start until 9 p.m. But they actually start at 8 p.m. here. Like they start at the time they said they were going to start. So a big part of time management is making sure you're actually on time to things, which can mean like leaving your house or like scheduling time to go places. Is really important too. You can't just have things back to back. You have to figure out that you have to go from one place to another, and that will take time. And the place you're going to is not going to care where you came from. They're just going to care that you're late. And often, like, some of the most interesting things will happen at the beginning, like before. For example, like if an event starts at 7 p.m. Most times people will actually get there half an hour early to talk to each other, and that's where all the networking is happening. So if you show up on time or if you show up late, you actually miss all the like important things that happened before. So for a lot of you know academic things, a lot of research things, you actually have to show up early to places, and that takes practice to make sure you know how you're doing that. But so I think, yeah, in balancing your time, making sure that you understand what what things you have to do with other people, and being really, really punctual and getting things submitted on time. Like it's very hard to convince people that you want to do your work late. I've learned how to do it a little bit better now, like figuring out what the deadlines are. But you really have to be on time. You have to manage your own time, figure out what really helped me was writing down, like, oh, cooking takes this long, like walking from this place to this place takes this long. And so now when I have to schedule something, I'm like, oh, like if I have to walk here, I will have to spend this much time walking. Then before that, I'll have to eat my dinner. So this is how much time I spend on dinner. This is how much time I spend on cooking my dinner. So like having notes about how much time each thing takes is really helpful, because when you schedule things for the future, you have a much better idea of, what time you can expect to show up to something. Does that answer your question about scheduling a little bit? I'm happy to talk more about it with you as well.
Okay, ma'am.
So I'm seeing some questions in the chat. The most recent question is, I completed my graduation in physics. I want to know about the competition level to get into the PhD programs in the US. This is a great question. The competition level or the acceptance rate depends on each university specifically. And the best way to know what that is to actually email the people who go to that university. Specifically, maybe if you're interested in physics, like email people who work in physics at that university and ask them. Before you apply to any PhD programs, you should email the department you're applying to and ask if they're accepting applications. Many times our department will not even be accepting an application. So if you apply, like nobody's even gonna look at your application. So definitely having like personal contact. If you are interested in a research position, email that professor and say, hey, I want to have a Zoom call with you for 15 minutes just to chat a little bit. And then that way you can make a little bit more personal connection with them, and you can ask them how competitive it is. Some programs have, maybe they'll have 100 applicants, and it's pretty typical to only accept maybe 20% of them. So I think the competition level can be anywhere from like 20% to some of the very selected programs are like 1 or 2%. And I think there's a lot of things you can do to become a more competitive applicant. For the PhD programs, the number one thing is having really good research, and not just doing the research on your own, but presenting it at conferences so that other people are able to see how good your research is. If you can publish a paper, that's a great way to prove that your research is important and that other people have seen it. Another big thing is having a good letter of recommendation from your research advisor or just anyone at your university who can say that your academic talent is really good. So the recommendation letter is also very important. And making sure you have a good one can really make you a more competitive applicant in the process too. For me, I think the biggest things that helped me get into a PhD program were one, doing research for 3 years and presenting it at science conferences every single year to make sure I got a lot of exposure and a lot of people saw my face. And then the other thing was networking, like talking to professors one-on-one to ask them about different research projects in their groups and telling them about my expertise. And, in the 15-minute Zoom call I would have with them, I would really prove that I was the best person to do their research project. And then that way, when I applied to something, they'd already seen my name, they already knew my face, they'd already talked to me, and I was already a better applicant than all the other people who hadn't reached out to have that conversation. So that's very important. It took me a long time to learn how to do it, and it was other, students who taught me how to do it. So I'm happy to pass that on. And if you need help with, that specific application process, definitely email me and I will help you with that. Other questions?
Thank you so much for all the information and all the small details you have given about US and the systems in US. Ma'am, can you speak a little about the SOP and how to write the emails so that they can really look into our emails how to show our interest in the field? The SOP, mainly the SOP. Ma'am, can you speak a little bit about it?
Yes. So the SOP, which is the statement of purpose, is usually a 2 to 3 page document that you submit to a PhD program. And it should, these professors don't know you very well, and the SOP is pretty much the best way for them to get to know you. So in the SOP, you should include your previous experience with research, if you have any of it, whether you did that, as part of a course or if you did that just on your own. If you have any presentations that you've done, definitely mention that in the SOP too. You have to, advertise yourself and tell them you're a really strong academic candidate too. So mention, which courses you have taken, which you did very well in, mention what grades you got, or, mention maybe in a class you did a project that was really good, talk about that project. So really advertise yourself very well in the SOP. You don't have to be humble. You don't have to be, don't play down your success at all. Talk about everything that you've done in your college program or outside of it too. That's a great place to talk about your extracurriculars or your passions. And then in the SOP, you also have to directly mention what your interest is and what kind of research you want to do. And if you had a conversation with a professor there, definitely mention that in the SOP as well. So that will help you stand out. Is you can say like, oh, I emailed this professor in your department. I had a 15-minute Zoom call with them and it went really great, and I would actually like to work with that professor. So that's for the SOP. For emailing professors, you need to keep the emails very short. People here don't like reading very long emails. And chances are if the email is long, they just won't even read it. So you want to make sure that your email is just 3 to 4 sentences. So the subject line should be like, student interested in your PhD program. Be very direct, tell them why you're emailing them. And then your email body should be, hello, Professor Blank. I saw, or you can say, hi, I'm a student at this university in India. I saw your webpage, which advertises your research projects. I thought they were really great. I read your paper, and I would like to do research with you. Can we schedule a 15-minute time to meet on Zoom to just chat? So if you ask somebody for like more hours of their life, they're not going to want to do it because they don't even know you. They don't know what, who they're giving their time to. So initially just ask for a 15 to 20-minute conversation with them and make sure that when you talk to them, you actually only talk for 15 or 20 minutes. If you have more questions, just, save them for later. You don't want to take up people's time at the beginning. You want to establish a relationship. So yeah, ask to meet with them for just 15, 20 minutes. In the 20 minutes you meet with them, ask them about their research project, and then just tell them a little bit about yourself, and then ask them like, what do you think are the ways we can move forward with this? So you can do a Zoom call with them, you can do a Skype call with them. Most professors who I emailed actually never even open the email. That's totally very common. So that's why you should never just focus on 1 or 2 people. You should actually be emailing like at least 7 or 8 different professors. so that at least one of them opens your email and looks at it. So that would be my advice for emailing people whose research or PhD program you're interested in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing a question in the chat from Nisha. For a master's course in biology, which field one should? That will depend on your interests, for sure, like what field of biology you're most interested in. So you can look up, you know, different universities in the US if you've heard their names and search biology and look at what kind of classes they have, which kind of if you're interested in medical biology or if you're interested in like animal biology or if you're interested in microbiology. So you can do that. You can figure that out on your own, or you can even take online classes like Coursera and edX have really interesting classes, and they're usually free. So you can use that to kind of explore your interests and figure out which field of biology might be most interesting to you. So I'm writing those names. These are two websites where you can actually take courses for free, and it can help you learn a lot, and it can also help you figure out your own interests. I can also add the links. So yeah, both of the links I'm adding are American kind of programs that are free online classes taught by American universities. So I would highly, highly recommend taking some of these classes and then putting this in your SOP. This could look really great on your resume. And when you talk to a professor, you can say, oh, I took a online class from your university and I really liked it, which is why I want to apply to your university too. So yeah, it's a great course. It's free. Everything is free. Everything is online, so you can take it from any part of the world in any time zone. This is one of the things I use a lot to learn. Other questions? These are great questions. I'm so inspired by all of you.
Ma'am, in your description, it is written that you have worked with NASA. Like, it will be helpful if you can share your experience with the NASA program.
Yes, definitely. Let me add a link to the NASA program that I did. It was called NASA Develop, which was basically working with NASA to make different technological tools that would be useful. So I worked on using satellite observations that are done by NASA to monitor environmental air pollution factors across the Bay Area. So it was actually a project that was really relevant to me. And I applied to this program. I was definitely the youngest person to apply for this program, but the reason I got the position was because I knew how to code in Python, and not a lot of other applicants knew how to code in Python. So if you have time and if you have the interest, I would definitely encourage learning how to code. Coding is something that can be applied to so many different fields and is very useful. And there's a lot of online classes that teach you how to code as well. And it can really help you get, some of the most competitive positions is because people who know how to code are just such a valuable addition to any team. So yeah, that's how I got the NASA program. And I knew a lot more about the coding than I knew about the science, but I kind of learned the science while I was in the program. And then there was a lot of emphasis on presenting our work to other parts of the NASA community as well, like people who work on space are a big part of NASA, and understanding how the work we're doing on Earth can help people in space, especially when you're working on a satellite, is really important. So I met with a lot of people who work on satellites and astronauts and figured out, how we can work together. And then actually, because I spent a lot of time at that was an internship that I did at the beginning. I spent a lot of time at my internship, like talking to other scientists at NASA, and networking. I actually got a job later on when this was a completely different project. They were like, again, we just need someone who can code. And I was like, oh, that's me. And I got a job with NASA's TCON project. I will add a link to that as well. Um, so yeah, the first job I got at NASA was mostly because I knew how to code. And then the full-time job I got at NASA after was because
does that answer your question?
sorry,
So
my
we have
Zoom froze for a
about
second. Are there other questions? Okay.
we have about 5 more minutes. If just a heads up, if anyone, I mean, we can go a little bit longer probably, but if you have any questions, please go ahead. Actually, I have a question, Garima. I think that will be maybe useful. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience from the perspective of being a woman. Like, how was it to, work maybe at NASA, or where, at least we think that they're mostly men, or any challenges that you faced, or, just your experience?
That's a great question. Most of NASA, most of the science field is very male dominated, especially dominated by white men. And they are not always the best people to work with. I'll be very honest. They can be really dominating. Men can take up a lot of talking time. Sometimes they'll steal people's ideas. Um, and that's pretty frequent and pretty common. So, there's two approaches to it. One is you can try to change the entire system and make it better for everyone, which I spend a lot of time doing. I serve on the board of the Women of Sciences Committee at Columbia, and really advocate for more policies that help, make universities and research better for all women and making those programs. But on a more personal scale, what you can do is, work really closely with the other women in your little community, whether that's your research group, in your classes, and find that supportive community of people. And that way, when you have to deal with men, or when you have to deal with people who are really dominating, you have a support group to help you get through that. So that's one way I've kind of dealt with it. In terms of how that has impacted me, I feel like it's very common where I walk into a room and I'm the only person who's a woman. And sometimes I don't get taken seriously, but I really have to learn how to advocate for myself. For example, I tell people what degrees I have, I tell people where I've worked, or I will, send them my resume ahead of time and be like, look, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm only going to come to this meeting if you're going to promise me that I'm going to be respected. And sometimes I've been in rooms or in research meetings where I'm not being respected, but I'm the like expert in the room, right? Like I know more than anybody else in the room because I studied it, and I'm still not being taken seriously. And when that happens, I've learned to just leave. Like, if people are not respecting me and my time and my expertise, like, I don't have to be there. And if they need me, they'll have to beg for me to come back. So that's what I've learned, is like, you as a woman have so much value, and when people are treating you poorly, you don't have to be there, you don't have to give them your time. You can just, you can leave, and you can tell them, I'm only going to come back if you stop doing what you were doing. And you are so talented that they will fall over and come back for you. So I used to be really scared. I was like, if I leave, they're never going to ask for me to come back. What I've really learned is, establishing your value. And if you are the expert in the room, or if you just want to be treated with respect, as we all should, you should demand that. And if you're not getting it, go somewhere else, find a better place. There are plenty of opportunities you don't have to stick with one just because it's the first one. Don't stay in any university, don't stay in any class where you're not being treated with respect. There are so many other places where you can find a supportive environment. So that has been really important to me, is knowing my own value and then having a good community of women, which it seems like you have going here. So that's really great. And definitely make sure you keep in touch with other women in your field, just in STEM or science, because that's really going to be the people who help you out later on.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Mhm.
In your bio, you have mentioned that you have worked in a botanical garden in Hawaii. As I'm myself a botany student, so I would like to know more about it. I'm really interested in knowing what work did you do there. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so I dropped a link to the botanical garden I worked at. This was actually when I was feeling a lot of burnout, and I wanted a job that was just, I didn't want to do any research. I didn't want to take any classes. I just wanted to go and do like farming or gardening. So I actually was just like garden staff there. I was not a researcher. I'm guessing you are more interested in the science part of the botany. But yeah, definitely if you are excited to, if you want to have an opportunity here, like I'd be happy to connect you with the people who work there. The program I did to get this, let me drop a link to that program as well. Yeah, so my job there was kind of taking care of the native plants in that region. So Hawaii has a really interesting flora and fauna. So my job was, planting them, watering them, figuring out like which areas of the garden were being overtaken by invasive species and replacing those with native species. And then also working with different groups on the island to figure out what the native species were of different parts of Hawaiian culture and making sure our garden represented all of those. So a lot of our garden was split into different kind of eco biomes, and we made sure that each of them represented a different part of Hawaii. So I learned a lot about the different native plants in different parts of Hawaii, and planting them and taking care of them and making sure that these plants, which are often very endangered plants, were being given a place where they were being propagated. So this was the program that I did that helped me get the job at the botanical garden. I don't know if this is a US citizen only program, but I do know some of the other botany organizations in Hawaii as well. So if you're interested, I would be happy to talk to you more about it. You can send me an email and I will happy to connect you with the people who work there as well if you're interested.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Other questions? I see a question in the chat about the general cost or the fee structure for studying abroad, mostly in the universities. So the school I went to, UC Berkeley, tuition is about $15,000 a year. And then on top of that, you have to pay rent to live in an apartment nearby, which comes out to about $1,000 a month. And then on top of that, you have to pay for your food. So I know it seems really expensive, but you should know that pretty often you don't have to pay full cost for universities. When you apply, you can apply for scholarships. That was a huge part of how I got through UC Berkeley. I applied for many different scholarships that reduced the cost of my attendance to half or 1/4. Many students, while they're in college, get a job working at a restaurant, or even you can even get paid for research. So you can actually get paid while you're in the university, which can decrease the cost of your university. So the general cost is always tuition, and then rent that you have to pay. If you're studying online, you don't have to pay a campus fee, but if you're studying on campus, like I was on the UC Berkeley campus, you generally have to pay a fee to be able to access the study lounges and the exercise rooms and the theaters and all those other things. So you usually pay about $500 at the beginning, and then it covers you for the rest of the time that you're there. And that's actually a really useful access to be able to have access to those study spaces and those exercise places or places to do crafts and arts and pottery and like hobbies. So your fee often covers not just your tuition, but also like fun experiences if you want to have them. And I would highly recommend, using university resources to go on nature treks or learn how to do a certain kind of art, or you often get access to a lot of different softwares as part of the university. So, and that's all covered by your cost and your fees. And then also all the schools should have their cost on their website directly. And the cost will include not just the tuition, but also the estimated cost of living in that area. Like New York is much more expensive than living in like Florida, which is another state. So generally when you go on the school's website, they will have a pretty good explanation of the cost of living in that area too. Oh, this is a great question. How do I manage my time? Not very well, honestly. I'm still learning how to do it. I keep a very strong Google Calendar. Like I put everything I'm doing on my Google Calendar because sometimes I will have something scheduled for next month or next year. And if I don't write it down somewhere, I'm not going to remember it. So I would definitely recommend using Google Calendar and write down all of your events. And the other thing I do is so when I wake up in the morning, I don't start doing work immediately because that's very stressful. So I wake up in the morning, I have my breakfast, I actually go for a morning walk or go outside for a little bit and de-stress before I start doing my work. And I take very frequent breaks when I'm doing my work because I feel like if I just work for 10 hours, the last 7 of those hours are not very productive. So I actually like to work in chunks of 2 hours and then I'll take a 30-minute break and then I work for 2 hours and take a 30-minute break. That's what works for me. And I try to not work on my weekends and take a break on my weekends too. But if I have to work on the weekend, I try to do it early in the morning so I can have my evenings to, do all the other things in my life. So the things that take up most of my time are actually taking my own classes, doing my research, and teaching. And I actually like, instead of doing all three things on the same day and having to, change my, just like my mind 3 times in a day, I like to have one day which is just classes, one day which is just research, one day which is just teaching. That's personally how I manage my time. Like I like to have days where I'm doing different things instead of running from meeting to meeting in a day. I'm still figuring it out though, so I'm not the perfect example of managing my time well. I miss deadlines sometimes. It happens. That's okay. It is what it is, and I have to learn that not everything is going to work. And if a deadline is coming up close and I can't do it, that's fine. Just letting it go. There'll be more opportunities in the future. This question is, how can I approach for an astronomy career abroad? So I think, yeah, again, my advice would be pretty similar, is look at, just Google like top schools for astronomy, right? It can be very broad. And then look at the different names of the universities that are mentioned in that Google search, and then look at their specific, like Google, like for example, the University of Hawaii actually has a really strong astronomy program. So you want to Google University of Hawaii astronomy, look at their website, see what kind of projects they have going on, if that's interesting to you, and then see if they have any open opportunities. So usually every website will have like a careers or jobs or open jobs page. Look at those, see if any of those are interesting to you. And move from there. Yeah, so it's specific to each university. And astronomy is, I don't know a whole lot about that field, but I know there's some like really strong programs that have a lot of observations. They have a lot of infrastructure to do astronomy research too. So you want to make sure you are looking for programs that already do a good job with astronomy and then joining those programs. Does that answer your question, Linda?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yeah. And yeah, again, email me and I can try to connect you with people I know who do astronomy. I'm trying to think of if my friends do any of that. I feel like I might have a few people I know who do astronomy in the US. So
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
other questions?
Hello, ma'am. I had a question which is actually about a quite sensitive topic, actually. Ma'am, was there any point where you felt uncomfortable or were you kind of, even in a subtle way, targeted because you belong to a different community?
Yeah, absolutely. When I talked about living on that ship, I think it was life-changing for my science career because it was the most exciting science I'd ever done. But like I was on that ship for 2 weeks. Most of the people there were men. Most of them were white. And if I didn't like something that was happening, I couldn't really leave. I think I talked about that as like one of the ways to deal with being a woman in STEM is if you don't like something, like leave, but you can't really leave. Sorry. You can't really leave if you're living in a ship in the middle of the ocean. And I felt very uncomfortable many times there and, just didn't really know what to do. There were only two other women on the ship, so I became really, really close to those women. Some of them weren't even scientists. One of them was like the chef on the ship. Nobody took her seriously, but she was one of the other women there, and I had to become really close to her. And I would ask her, like, who in this group do you trust and who do you not trust here? And I would only try to work with the people that other women trusted. It actually informed, like, it made me want to do science as a career, but it made me really sure that I want to do science at a university where I have, different people around. And like in a university, like if you don't like one lab, you can very easily move to another lab, or you can very easily move to another field, even. And you have just access to a bigger network. Whereas if you're doing field research, often you're kind of trapped with those people. So it's great if you really enjoy field research and you enjoy the people you're working with. It feels like a vacation, right? Like this living on the ship could have felt like a cruise, like a carnival cruise. It didn't feel like that for me. And so it actually changed the research I was interested in. I decided no longer field work. I only wanted to do computational research at a university. I just didn't want to put myself in another situation where I could be uncomfortable like that again. So yeah, that's happened a few times. And now I really look for, um, opportunities where I will have access to a big network of people and not a small group of people because I just don't trust that. And then also when I apply to programs, like when I was applying to PhD programs, I emailed different graduate students, especially women in that program, and I said, hello, I'm a woman applying to this program. I just want to know, like, do you feel safe in this program? Who are the people here that you trust? Who are the people here, the professors or the advisors you don't trust? And the other women at that program, like at those programs, would be really, really open with me and tell me like, oh no, but don't work with this person. This person will make you very uncomfortable. Or work with this person. This person's really supportive. So yeah, definitely like, even if I don't know a woman, I realize that oftentimes like I just have an easier time connecting with them. And they would be pretty open and help me, like they will protect me. So definitely like feel free to reach out to other women. Most of the times like they will do their best to help you out. Chances are they've also been in that uncomfortable position and they don't want to make sure you are in it. So I think that's how I've kind of navigated that, is picking only opportunities where I will not be stuck with just a small group of people, and making sure I really talk to people before I join any university or program or field campaign, and figuring it out ahead of time.
Thank you, ma'am.
But very good question though, and I'm glad you're already thinking about it. It's something to think about before you apply to a program instead of after. There's a question here about which institute will be better for learning big data analytics abroad. I can type out the names of some of the schools I know. I don't know all the different schools in the country. So I would encourage you to actually look on Coursera and edX and search for big data and see which programs are offering courses there. So actually, let me do that right now and figure out. So here's a link to the big data classes that American universities are teaching online. So it looks like the University of Adelaide, the University of Pennsylvania in the US, UC San Diego, Curtin X University, Rice University. Yeah, so look at this list of big data courses and figure out if any of these are universities you're interested in. So these would probably be the best programs to apply to. Any other questions? These are really exciting questions, and I'm inspired to see how all of you are in different fields of science. Like I've heard big data, I've heard botany, zoology, so that's really exciting that you are all in different fields of science. Other questions?
Ma'am, I have a question. Ma'am, to apply in different universities in the USA, ma'am, do a student have to pay for every university, or is the admission, not admission, the applying procedure is free, or like do you have to pay the money for every university?
So officially, you would have to pay for every application to every university. But it's also, you can request something called a fee waiver. And you can then, like, I just dropped one random link just to Berkeley. Each university has a different requirement for who can get a fee waiver and who can't. But I would definitely like encourage you to apply, like for any school that you're applying to, just Google like university plus the word fee waiver, figure out what their policy is. And you should be able to get like a discount on most of those applications. And there's no like reason not, like asking for a fee waiver won't impact your admission. So don't be afraid to ask for this fee waiver. Some of those are really expensive applications. And it can be a real financial drain to have to apply to all those schools. So try to figure out if there's like a way you can get a free application. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Mhm.
Ma'am, can you tell me something about the exams we have to, or the entrance examinations we have to sit for, getting admissions in foreign universities, or how to, take a seat, to get a seat there, how to prepare, or how to prepare ourselves for the exams?
Yeah. Really different in applying to graduate programs in the US is when you take a application test. It's a pretty general test. It's not specific to your field. I know in India, when you apply to a program, you take like engineering exams or whatever. That's not how it is. You take a general test, and then most of your application is actually centered on your SOP, and your recommendation letters and your previous previous research experiences. So definitely focus more on those. And the admissions test, the general admissions test you'll have to take is called the GRE, and I'm putting a link now to the exam and the program, basically the website where you would sign up to take this exam. So right now they're doing all of them online. So you should be able to take them from any part of the world. And generally they have tests every 3 to 4 weeks that you can take any of them. You just have to pick one test to take and submit your score. And if you don't like the score you get the first time, you can take the test again and again until you get the score that you want. So some people take it 3 or 4 times before they get the score they want, and that's perfectly fine. And your admission will not be based on just, that's just one of the many factors that's considered. Mostly it's your previous experiences, your letters of recommendation, and your application writing, the SOP.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, you just mentioned about GRE. And I also wanted to ask that besides this, I've heard about those English language proficiency tests that we have to pass. Are those compulsory, ma'am, to get into one of the universities there?
That's a great question. I'm glad you mentioned it. I would have forgotten that. So usually it's called the TOEFL. I don't remember what TOEFL stands for, but it's the English language test that's usually required. Whether or not it's required for you will depend on the school you went to in India and then also the school you're applying to in the US. So some schools required for everybody from a different country. Some schools say if you went to this school or this school, you don't have to take a TOEFL. It's very specific. So look for the specific admissions requirements on the website of the program or the university you're interested in, and they will make it very clear if the TOEFL or other English language proficiency exams are required for you or not. So if you went to an English speaking school in India, generally they won't require it, but if you went to a school that is taught in multiple languages, they might require it. Anyways, sorry, that's a specific thing, but look for the admissions requirements of the specific program you're interested in taking in. And it definitely can't hurt to take this exam. It's kind of expensive, but it can be a good boost for your application if you are applying to a school in the US.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, also, we are required to submit an essay or sometimes a scientific write-up. And what should be included in those to make them attractive?
Yeah, I think for those essays be very clear. Sometimes they have a word limit requirement on how many words you can write. So make sure you stay in that requirement, and then make sure that you're maybe if you work in like botany research, right? Like make sure that your writing, your scientific writing, is something that can be read by someone in a completely different field and they can still understand what you're talking about. So that's very important. Make sure that you are citing other papers in your scientific writing. You're not just writing on your own, you're like proving that you read the scientific literature and that the work you are doing, your writing, is informed by other people's scientific research. So definitely make sure you reference other papers, other scientific discoveries, or just other research that's happening. So I think those are the two most important things. One, make sure it's something that is very clear and can be understood by people outside of your field. And two, make sure you're referencing a lot of other science that's happening to prove in the field very well, and that you are doing something new in the field that nobody has done before.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we'll give another minute or so if anyone has any last minute questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, and again, if you don't have a question today, but you have a question later on, you're welcome to email me, or you can add me on Twitter too. I spend time there. You can ask me questions there. You can connect with me. I'm happy to keep being a resource for you. We don't just have to meet and keep this going.
Okay, so if we have no other questions, we'll wrap this up. Garima, thank you so much for your time, and this was great. I think it was very informal. You gave a lot of good information, and very much what we envision in this project. So thank you so much. And girls, great questions. And if anyone wants to keep in touch with Garima, has questions later on, if you're feeling shy or whatever, for whatever reason, you can definitely reach out to her. Garima, thanks for being so open for that. And we'll keep in touch. And girls, we'll keep in touch too. And I'll see you in the next session. Bye, everyone.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.